The next morning, 4 guards came to get Phillips. They were bigger than the ones from the docking bay, and their armor looked more expensive. The leader had gold trim on his uniform and carried a weapon that hummed with energy. "You will come with us now, human," the leader said. That Phillips finished his protein bar and stood up. He had slept well and felt ready for whatever the aliens wanted to throw at him. He grabbed his folding chair and slung it over his shoulder like a backpack. "Ready when you are, boys." They walked through corridors that were very different from the maintenance areas. These halls were wide and tall with golden walls that reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at. Holographic displays showed planets and star systems with alien writing that probably listed all the worlds the Empire had conquered. Other aliens walked through these halls, but they moved differently than the ones in the maintenance bay. These aliens wore fancy clothes and walked with their heads high. When they saw the Zephyrian guards, they stopped and bowed until the guards passed. Phillips noticed that none of the aliens made eye contact with him. They looked at his guards with respect and fear, but they pretended he did not exist. He was just a problem being dragged to its solution. The throne room doors were 30 feet, tall and made of some kind of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, and they glowed with a soft blue light. 2 more guards stood on either side of the doors. They wore armor that looked like it cost more than most human cities. "The human will wait here," the leader of his escort said. They made him stand in front of the doors for 20 minutes. Phillips used the time to look around and take mental notes. Everything in this place was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. The ceilings were too high, the corridors were too wide, and the decorations were too fancy. It was like a museum dedicated to showing off how rich and powerful the owners were. Finally, the doors opened with a sound like thunder. The throne room was the biggest indoor space Phillips had ever seen. The ceiling was 5 stories high and covered with paintings of alien battles. Hundreds of different species lined the walls, all dressed in their finest clothes and all looking toward the center of the room, where a massive throne sat on a platform 20 feet above the floor. The throne was made of black stone and covered with jewels that sparkled like stars. Behind it, a huge window showed the planet below with its red oceans and purple clouds. "The human will approach," someone announced in a voice that echoed through the chamber. Phillips walked toward the center of the room. As he moved, he could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. Some looked curious, some looked disgusted, and some looked hungry like they were watching their dinner walk by. More aliens entered the room through a side door. These were obviously important because everyone else bowed when they appeared. They wore robes made from materials that seemed to shift color as they moved, and their jewelry was so bright it was hard to look at directly. Then the Emperor arrived. Emperor Vexthari was 12 feet tall and covered in scales that changed color as he moved. Right now they were deep blue with gold edges, which probably meant something important in alien body language. He had 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut steel, and 3 eyes that could look in different directions at the same time. His clothes were made from silk that came from conquered worlds, and his crown was crafted from metals that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Everything about him said that he was the most important being in the room, and everyone else was just furniture. The Emperor climbed the steps to his throne while an alien with too many mouths read out his titles and achievements. The list went on for 10 minutes and included things like Destroyer of the Kelvani Republic and He Who Made the Crystal Worlds Kneel. When the introductions were finished, the real ceremony began. Representatives from different species came forward one by one to show their respect and fear. The insect-like Krivak delegates got down on the floor and made themselves as flat as possible. The water-breathing Moldani made high-pitched sounds that hurt Philip's ears. Each group had their own way of showing that they knew the Emperor was their master. Finally, it was Philip's turn. Everyone in the room watched as he walked to the center of the chamber. The Emperor's scales shifted to a brighter gold, which probably meant he was paying attention. The 3 eyes focused on Phillips like laser beams. Phillips looked around the room, taking in all the fancy decorations and scared faces. Then he unfolded his chair, set it down in front of the Emperor's throne, and sat down. He put his boots up on the sacred negotiation table that had been used for 1,000 surrender ceremonies. The silence that followed was so complete that Phillips could hear his own heartbeat. The Emperor's scales changed from gold to deep red in about 2 seconds. His claws extended and his 3 eyes all focused on Phillips with an intensity that could have melted steel. "Human," the Emperor said, and his voice was like an earthquake. "Do you understand where you are?" Phillips pulled a protein bar out of his pocket and unwrapped it slowly. "I am in your throne room, talking to you about this whole war situation. This is sacred ground. That table has witnessed the surrender of 47 worlds." Phillips took a bite of his protein bar and chewed thoughtfully. "Nice table. Good craftsmanship. Is it local wood or did you import it?" The Emperor's scales went from red to almost black. Every alien in the room took a step back. Several of them started making the whimpering sounds that their species made when they were about to die. "You dare to mock the Imperial presence?" "I am not mocking anyone. I am just asking about your furniture. I appreciate good woodwork." Phillips finished his protein bar and looked around the room again. "Speaking of which, do you guys have any coffee? This might take a while, and I did not get much sleep last night." "Your beds are kind of hard." The Emperor stood up from his throne, all 12 feet of him. His claws were fully extended now, and his scales were cycling through colors that Phillips had never seen before. It was like watching a rainbow have a nervous breakdown. Silence. The Emperor roared, and the sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "You will show proper respect, or you will die where you sit." Phillips leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head. "I am showing you respect. I came here to talk instead of just ignoring your message. I could have stayed home and watched TV. You put your feet on the sacred table of submission." It was the closest place to put them. "My back gets sore if I do not elevate my legs." The Emperor pointed one of his clawed hands at Phillips. "Guards, remove this creature from my sight." 10 guards started moving toward Phillips, but then they stopped. The Emperor's advisor, a thin alien with gray skin and too many fingers, whispered something in his ear. "What do you mean, diplomatic immunity?" The Emperor demanded. The advisor whispered some more. The Emperor's scales went through several more color changes before settling on a dark purple that probably meant he was frustrated. "You hide behind ancient laws like a coward," the Emperor said. Phillips shrugged. "I prefer to think of it as being prepared. I read the Galactic Treaty before I came here. Article 15, Section 3, diplomatic representatives cannot be harmed during official negotiations." "Then these negotiations are over." Phillips did not move from his chair. "Are they? Because I thought you wanted to talk about humanity joining your empire. If you send me home now, what do you think my government is going to tell me to do?" The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "What will they tell you to do?" Phillips smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "They will tell me to come back with a bigger ship and more friends. Humans do not like being threatened. It makes us cranky." For the first time since entering the room, Phillips saw something other than anger in the Emperor's eyes. He saw uncertainty. "Your species is primitive. Your ships are small and your weapons are weak." "That is true," Phillips agreed. "But we are also crazy enough to fight even when we know we cannot win. Ask the Germans from World War II, ask the British Empire. Ask anyone who ever thought they could push humans around without a fight." The Emperor's scales shifted to a color that was almost white. Phillips did not know what that meant, but he could guess it was not good. "You would choose extinction over surrender?" Phillips stood up from his chair and looked directly into all 3 of the Emperor's eyes. "Your Majesty, we would choose extinction over a lot of things. That is just how we are built." The throne room fell silent again. This time, the silence felt different. It felt like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air gets heavy and everything waits for the lightning to strike. Phillips sat back down and put his feet up on the table again. "But we do not have to choose extinction today. We can just talk like civilized people and see if we can work something out. What do you say?" Emperor Vextari stormed out of the throne room with his robes flying behind him like dark wings. His scales were still cycling through angry colors and his claws left scratches in the marble floor. Every alien in the chamber stayed perfectly still until the Emperor was gone. Then they scattered like leaves in a windstorm. Phillips folded up his chair and headed back to his quarters. The guards escorted him, but they kept more distance than before. One of them kept looking at him like he was a bomb that might go off at any second in the Emperor's private chambers. 3 of his most trusted advisors waited for him. General Kexmore was a massive warrior with scars covering his armor and weapons hanging from every inch of his belt. Strategic Advisor Tellan looked like a walking stick insect with enormous eyes and fingers that never stopped moving. High Chamberlain Morthak was old and fat, and covered in jewelry that showed how important he was. The Emperor sat down hard in his private chair, and his scales finally settled on a dark green that meant he was thinking hard about something unpleasant. What just happened in there? He demanded. General Kexmore stepped forward. The humans showed no fear, Your Majesty. In 40 years of conquest, I have never seen a species representative act with such disrespect. He put his feet on the sacred table, Morthak added. The table where the Calvini Prime Minister signed his world's surrender, where the Moldani Queen gave up her entire ocean empire. Tellan moved closer to the Emperor. His huge eyes focused on the recordings they had made of Philip's behavior. This is not random disrespect, Your Majesty. This is calculated psychological warfare. Explain, the Emperor commanded. Tellan activated a holographic display that showed human historical data. Images of human warriors and leaders appeared in the air between them. Humans have an unusual trait among galactic species. When faced with superior force, most species submit or flee. Humans become more aggressive, General Kexmore laughed. Impossible. We have studied their military. Primitive kinetic weapons. Chemical propulsion systems. They only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Their technology is primitive, yes, but their psychology is not. Tellan showed more images. They have a long history of fighting against impossible odds. Small groups of humans have defeated much larger forces through pure determination. The Emperor leaned forward. Show me. The display changed to show human battles throughout history. 300 Spartans holding off a Persian army of thousands. American colonists defeating the British Empire. Tiny groups of resistance fighters stopping massive invasion forces. They call it fighting the good fight, Tellan explained. Humans would rather die standing up than live on their knees. Then we will kill them all, General Kexmore said. Problem solved. That may not be wise, Tellan replied. Our psychological warfare specialists have studied human responses to threats. The more pressure we apply, the more united and dangerous they become. In his quarters, Phillips was having his own meeting with his small diplomatic team. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez sat on the bed while Dr. Ben Clark paced around the room like a caged animal. Ryan, what the hell are you doing? Rodriguez demanded. You just insulted the most powerful being in 3-star systems. Phillips was lying on the floor doing push-ups. I am showing him that humans do not scare easily. By putting your feet on their sacred table? By acting like a normal person instead of a terrified victim. Dr. Clark stopped pacing and looked at Phillips like he had lost his mind. Normal people do not act casual around galactic emperors who can crack planets in half. Phillips finished his push-ups and sat up. Ben, you have studied their culture. What is the one thing that holds their empire together? Fear. Every species is afraid of being destroyed, so they obey. Right, and what happens to bullies when someone stops being afraid of them? Clark thought about it for a moment. They get confused, they do not know how to react? Rodriguez shook her head. This is not a schoolyard, Ryan, this is real life. They have battleships. So did the British when they tried to keep America as a colony. So did the Germans when they invaded Russia. So did every empire that thought it could push people around forever. Phillips stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see alien ships moving around the station like metal sharks. Some of them were big enough to hold entire cities. The thing about bullies is that they are always bullies on the inside, no matter how big they get. And bullies Only understand one thing. What is that? Clark asked. They understand when refuses to be bullied. Back in the Emperor's chambers, the debate was getting heated. General Kexmore wanted to attack Earth immediately and make an example of the humans. Morthic wanted to find a way to punish Phillips without breaking diplomatic immunity. Tilan wanted to study human psychology more before making any decisions. Emperor Vexthari listened to them argue while he watched recordings of Phillips' behavior. The human looked so calm and casual, like he was visiting friends instead of facing potential death. What if he is right? The Emperor said suddenly. The three advisors stopped arguing and looked at him. What do you mean, Your Majesty? Morthak asked. What if humans really will fight to the death instead of surrendering? What if conquest will cost more than it is worth? General Kexmore's scarred face twisted into a snarl. Your Majesty, we have never lost a war. Our technology is superior. Our forces are vast. Our forces are also spread across 47 worlds, Telem pointed out. If humans fight as hard as their history suggests, conquest could take decades and cost millions of lives. The Emperor stood up and walked to his window. Below, his capital world spread out like a jeweled carpet. Cities full of conquered peoples who worked for his glory. Oceans full of resources that fed his empire. All of it taken by force and held by fear. There is another problem, he said quietly. What problem, Your Majesty? Morthic asked. The other species. They saw what happened in the throne room today. They saw a human refuse to bow. Tilan's eyes widened as he understood. If other species think they can resist without consequences, exactly. This human has not just insulted me. He has given every oppressed species in the galaxy a very dangerous idea. The Emperor turned away from the window and looked at his advisors. His scales had shifted to a pale yellow that meant he was worried about something important. Double the security around all subjugated worlds. Increase surveillance on their communications. And bring me everything we know about human military capabilities. General Kexmore smiled. Are we preparing for invasion, Your Majesty? We are preparing for the possibility that this one human has started something that could destroy everything. We have built? In his quarters, Phillips was reading reports on his tablet when the lights suddenly went out. The air conditioning stopped working and the temperature started to rise. The water from the bathroom taps turned brown and smelled like chemicals. Rodriguez grabbed her sidearm. They are trying to break us down? Phillips did not seem concerned. He pulled out a small flashlight and kept reading. Let them try. I have been in worse places than this. The temperature kept rising until the room felt like an oven. The air became thick and hard to breathe. Clark started sweating and Rodriguez looked like she was about to pass out. Phillips stood up and walked to the door. He pressed the communication button. Hey, this is Phillips. I think there might be a problem with our environmental controls. It is getting pretty warm in here. A voice answered immediately. There is no problem. You will endure current conditions. Oh. Okay. Well, in that case, do you guys deliver food? I'm getting hungry and this heat is making me want some ice cream. There was a long pause. Then the air conditioning came back on and the lights returned to normal. Rodriguez stared at Phillips in amazement. How did you know they would fix it? Phillips sat back down and returned to his reading. Because they want to break me, not kill me. Dead humans do not make good examples. An hour later, the food supply was cut off. Phillips responded by calling the station's food court and ordering pizza. When they said they did not deliver to diplomatic quarters, he asked to speak to their manager and gave them a review of his authentic Zephyrian cultural experience on the Galactic Travel Network. The pizza arrived 30 minutes later. Clark watched Phillips eat a slice of pepperoni pizza, while their captors tried to figure out how to handle a prisoner who treated imprisonment like a vacation. Ryan, I think you might actually be crazy. Phillips grinned and offered him a slice. Ben, sanity is overrated. Besides, someone has to teach these aliens that humans do not break as easily as they think. Outside in the corridor, 2 guards listened to the humans laughing and sharing food. They had never heard prisoners laugh before. It was a sound that made them very uncomfortable. One guard turned to the other. Should we report this? The other guard thought about it. Report what? That the humans are happy? They decided to say nothing. But both of them spent the rest of their shift wondering, what kind of species stays cheerful when facing certain death? The next morning, Emperor Vextari decided to handle the human problem personally. He stormed through the corridors of his station with his guards running to keep up. His scales were bright orange with red spots, which everyone knew meant he was about to do something violent. He burst through the door to Philip's quarters without announcing himself, expecting to find a broken and terrified human begging for mercy. Instead, he found Philip sitting at the small table playing cards with his team. They had somehow connected the surveillance equipment to their tablet computer, and were using it as a speaker to play old Earth music. A song called Born to Be Wild was echoing through the room. Phillips looked up from his cards and smiled. Your Majesty! Good morning. Want to join us? We are playing poker. The Emperor's scales went through 3 different color changes in 5 seconds. You are supposed to be suffering. We are suffering, Rodriguez said, showing her cards to Clark. I have been losing all morning. Phillips gestured to an empty spot at the table. Seriously, do you want to play? It is a fun game. I can teach you the rules. Emperor Vextari had conquered 47 worlds. He had faced down armies and destroyed entire civilizations. But he had never encountered anything like this casual human who treated imprisonment like a social gathering. You mock me, the Emperor said. Phillips looked genuinely confused. How am I mocking you? I invited you to play cards. That is being friendly. You should be afraid. Why? You have not hurt us. You gave us a room and food and entertainment. Phillips gestured at the music system they had jury-rigged from the surveillance gear. Your security equipment makes a pretty good stereo system. The Emperor's claws extended. I could kill you right now. Phillips nodded. You could? But then you would have to explain to your people why you murdered a diplomatic representative. Plus, you would miss out on learning poker? It is really a great game. For 10 full seconds, the Emperor just stared at Phillips. His scales cycled through colors that his own advisors had never seen before. Finally, he turned and left without saying another word. Phillips went back to his cards. I think he likes me. Clark shook his head. Ryan, you are going to get us all killed. Probably, but we will go out doing something fun. Later that day, Phillips decided to escalate things. He used his diplomatic immunity to leave his quarters and explore the station. The guards had to follow him, but they could not stop him as long as he did not break any major laws. He found his way to the main plaza, a huge open area in the center of the station where different species came to trade and socialize. It was like a shopping mall, but bigger and full of aliens instead of humans. Phillips set up a small folding table he had brought from his quarters and pulled out a portable cooking device that Rodriguez had packed in their emergency supplies. Within minutes, he was cooking hamburgers in the middle of the Galactic Empire's most important space station. The smell of cooking meat drew attention immediately. Aliens stopped what they were doing and stared at this strange human who was preparing food in public like it was the most normal thing in the world. Fresh hamburgers. Phillips called out, "Get your Earth-style hamburgers here. Free samples. For anyone who wants to try." A small crowd began to gather. Most of the aliens looked scared and confused, but some of them seemed curious about this new food that smelled so good. An alien that looked like a walking plant creature approached the table carefully. It had never seen a human before and was not sure if Phillips was dangerous. What is hamburger? It asked in broken galactic standard. Phillips flipped a burger on his little grill and smiled. It is ground meat cooked on heat and served on bread. Very popular on Earth. Would you like to try some? The plant creature nodded nervously. Phillips made a small burger and handed it over. The alien took a tiny bite, then its leaves started changing color with what could only be happiness. Is good? The plant creature announced to the crowd. More aliens began to approach. A group of the insect-like Krivak who had been so submissive in the throne room came over to see what was happening. So did some of the water-breathing Moldani wearing their environmental suits. Phillips kept cooking and talking to everyone. like he was hosting a neighborhood barbecue instead of committing what was probably a major crime against imperial dignity. "Where are you from?" he asked a small furry alien that was eating its third burger. "Kepler system," the alien replied. "Been conquered for 20 years. Never had food like this." "Well, you are welcome to Earth any time. We love visitors." The crowd kept growing. Word was spreading through the station that a human was giving away free food and treating everyone like they were equals. Aliens who had not spoken to each other in years were standing together, sharing burgers and talking about their homeworlds. Emperor Vexthari arrived with a full squad of guards just as Phillips was starting to tell jokes to a group of young aliens who were laughing so hard they could barely breathe. The Emperor's scales were now a color that no one had ever seen before. They were cycling through red, black, purple, and white so fast that it looked like his entire body was having a seizure. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared. The crowd of aliens immediately scattered, dropping their burgers and running for cover. Within seconds, the plaza was empty except for Phillips, the Emperor, and about 50 guards. Phillips looked around at the abandoned food and sighed. "That is a shame. Everyone was having such a good time. You have violated station protocols. You have disrupted public order. You have—" Phillips interrupted him by holding up a burger. "Have you ever actually tried Earth food? I mean, really tried it?" The Emperor stared at the offered burger like it was a live bomb. "I do not eat the food of inferior species." "How do you know?" "We are inferior if you have never tried our food? Maybe we are better at some things than you thought." "Your technology is primitive," Philip shrugged. "Sure, but our hamburgers are pretty good. And our music is not bad either, and we tell decent jokes. Maybe being advanced is not just about having big spaceships." The Emperor's scales stopped cycling and settled on a deep blue. That meant he was thinking about something that confused him. "You treat this like a social gathering? You are a prisoner facing possible execution." "Am I? Because you keep coming to talk to me instead of just executing me. You keep trying to scare me instead of just killing me. That does not sound like someone who has made up his mind." Phillips took a bite of his own burger and chewed thoughtfully. "You know what I think? I think you are curious about humans. I think you want to understand how someone can be this calm when facing someone as powerful as you." The Emperor leaned forward. "You think I'm curious? I think you have spent so long having everyone be afraid of you that you forgot what it feels like to talk to someone who is not scared. And now you do not know what to do about it." For a moment, the Emperor just stood there. His scales went through several more color changes before settling on a pale yellow that meant uncertainty. "You are trying to manipulate me with psychological tactics." Phillips finished his burger and started cleaning up his cooking equipment. Maybe I am just a guy from Earth who does not like being pushed around." "You will have to decide which one you think is true." The Emperor watched him pack up his things. "What do you want from me, human?" Phillips looked up from his cleaning. "I want you to stop threatening to kill my entire species. I want you to sit down and talk like a reasonable person. And I want you to try a hamburger because they really are pretty good." The Emperor's scales shifted to white, then back to blue, then to a color that was almost silver. "You want me to negotiate with you as an equal. I want you to negotiate with me as a person. Equal, superior, inferior, I do not care about any of that. I just want to have a conversation where nobody is threatening to blow up anybody else's planet." The silence that followed was different from the angry silences they had shared before. This one felt like the Emperor was actually thinking about what Phillips had said. Finally, the Emperor spoke. "If I agree to talk, will you stop these public demonstrations?" Phillips grinned. "If you agree to talk like a person instead of a conqueror, I will stop treating you like a bully." The Emperor's scales settled on a solid blue color and stayed. "There, very well, we will talk, but not here, not in public." "Fine with me, your office or mine?" The Emperor almost smiled. "Almost. Mine, but I am bringing guards." Phillips packed up the last of his equipment. "Bring all the guards you want." "I am bringing hamburgers." As they walked back toward the Imperial quarters, neither of them noticed the small groups of aliens who were still hiding behind pillars and in doorways, whispering to each other about the human who had treated them like friends and the Emperor, who had agreed to negotiate instead of simply crushing his enemies. Change was coming to the Galactic Empire. It smelled like hamburgers and sounded like laughter, and it scared the people in power more than any army ever could. 6 months later, Ambassador Ryan Phillips sat in his new office on the Imperial Station. The room was much nicer than his old quarters, with a big window that looked out at the traffic of ships coming and going. His desk still had boot marks on it from that first day, and he had decided to keep them as a reminder. The door chimed, and Emperor Vexthari walked in. He was wearing simpler clothes now, and his scales were usually the calm blue-green that indicated contentment. They had been meeting like this every week, working on the transition from Empire to Confederation. "Good morning, Ryan," the Emperor said, sitting down in the sea. 3 days later, Emperor Vexthari emerged from his private chambers looking like a different person. His scales had settled into colors that his advisors had never seen before, soft blues and greens that seemed to indicate something between confusion and acceptance. General Kexmore was waiting outside the Emperor's door with a dozen other military commanders. They had been planning the invasion of Earth while their leader had been locked away thinking about hamburgers and humans who refused to show proper fear. "Your Majesty," Kexmore said, stepping forward, "the fleet is ready. We can begin the assault on Earth within 6 hours. The Emperor looked at his general like he was seeing him for the first time. "Cancel the attack." The words hit the military commanders like a physical blow. Several of them started talking at once, their voices rising in panic and confusion. "Your Majesty, we cannot show weakness," one of them said. "The other species will." "Think they can resist us?" said another. "This human has insulted the Empire," said a third. "We must respond with force." Emperor Vexthari raised one of his 4 hands and the commanders fell silent. I said, "Cancel the attack. I want to speak." With the human again, alone this time. General Kexmore's scarred face twisted into an expression of disbelief. "Your Majesty, surely you do not intend to negotiate with this creature. That is exactly what I intend to do." The Emperor walked past his shocked commanders and headed toward the small conference room where he had agreed to meet Phillips. Behind him, he could hear them whispering to each other in voices full of worry and anger. Phillips was already waiting in the conference room, sitting in his folding chair with his feet propped up on the table. He had brought a small cooler full of food and drinks, and the room smelled like coffee and fresh bread. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Phillips said. "I brought breakfast." "Hope you are hungry." The Emperor sat down across from him. Without his throne and his fancy robes, he looked smaller. Still dangerous, but more like a person and less like a force of nature. "You have done something to me, human," the Emperor said quietly. Phillips poured coffee into 2 cups and slid one across the table. "What do you mean?" "For 3 days I have been thinking about what you said. About bullies and fear and people who refuse to be pushed around. I have been thinking about my empire and how I built it." Phillips took a sip of his coffee and waited. He had learned that sometimes the best thing to do was just listen. "Every species I have conquered became my enemy first," the Emperor continued. "They resisted, so I crushed them. They fought back, so I destroyed their armies. They refused to surrender, so I broke their worlds until they had no choice." "That is one way to build an empire," Phillips agreed. "But you did not resist. You did not fight. You just refused to be impressed." The Emperor's scales shifted to a light blue. "In 40 years of conquest, no one has ever done that before." Phillips leaned forward in his chair. "Can I tell you something? When I was a kid, there was this bully at my school. Big kid, mean as a snake, scared everyone. He used to take lunch money from the smaller kids." The Emperor nodded, listening carefully. "One day he came for my lunch money, and I just said no. Not in a tough way, not like I was going to fight him. I just said no and kept eating my sandwich. He did not know what to do with that." "What happened?" Philip smiled. He stood there for about 5 minutes, waiting for me to get scared. When I did not, he just walked away, never bothered me again. Turns out he only knew how to deal with people who were afraid of him. The Emperor was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Softer. You think I'm like that bully? I think you are exactly like that bully. But here is the thing, that bully turned out to be a pretty good guy once he stopped trying to scare everyone. Maybe you could too. You want me to stop being an emperor? Phillips shook his head. I want you to stop being a bully. There is a difference. Before the Emperor could respond, the conference room door burst open. General Kexmore stormed in with a squad of soldiers behind him. Their weapons were drawn and their faces were hard with determination. Your Majesty, this has gone far enough, Kexmore announced. This human has clearly used some kind of mind control on you. We are taking him into custody. The Emperor started to stand up, but Phillips held up a hand to stop him. General, before you arrest me, can I ask you a question? Kexmore's weapon was pointed directly at Phillips' chest. You can ask. I might not answer. How many soldiers have you lost conquering all these worlds? The question caught Kexmore off guard. What does that matter? Humor me. How many of your people died building this empire? Kexmore thought about it. Millions, maybe tens of millions. Conquest is expensive. Phillips nodded. And how much do you spend keeping all these conquered worlds in line? Garrison troops, surveillance, putting down rebellions? A significant portion of our military budget, the Emperor said quietly. He was beginning to understand where Phillips was going with this. So you spend millions of lives to conquer people, then spend billions of credits to keep them conquered. And they hate you the whole time, so they keep trying to rebel, which costs you even more. General Kexmore's weapon never wavered. That is the price of empire. What if there was a better way? Phillips asked. What if instead of forcing people to obey you, you gave them reasons to want to work with you? Impossible, Kexmore snorted. Fear is the only language inferior species understand. Phillips pulled out his tablet and activated a communication program. Let me show you something. The screen filled with images from all over the Galactic Empire. On world after world, the same thing was happening. Aliens were gathering in public spaces, sharing food, talking to each other across species lines. They were copying what they had seen Phillips do in the station plaza. This started 3 days ago, Phillips explained. Right after our little barbecue. Word spread through the Galactic Communication Network. People started organizing their own gatherings. They are calling them human parties. The Emperor leaned closer to the screen. On dozens of worlds, aliens who had never spoken to each other were sharing meals and telling stories. They were laughing together and treating each other like friends instead of conquered subjects. They are rebelling, Kexmore said, his voice tight with anger. No, Phillips replied. They are not rebelling. They are not fighting your soldiers or attacking your installations. They are just refusing to be miserable. The Emperor watched the images scroll by. His scales had shifted to a pale yellow that indicated deep thought. They look happy. They are happy. For the first time in decades, they are remembering what? It feels like to enjoy themselves. General Kexmore raised his weapon. This ends now. I am arresting this human for inciting rebellion across the Empire. General, the Emperor said quietly, put down your weapon. Your Majesty, he is destroying everything we have built. The Emperor stood up slowly. His scales shifted to a deep gold that meant he had made an important decision. No, General. He is showing us how to build something better. Kexmore's face went pale. Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. We are warriors, we are conquerors. We are also tired, the Emperor replied. Tired of fighting. Tired of watching our soldiers die. Tired of ruling people who hate us. The Emperor turned to Phillips. What are you proposing, human? Phillips leaned back in his chair. A partnership. Instead of conquering people, you invite them to join you. Instead of ruling through fear, you lead through respect. Instead of taking what you want, you trade for it, and in return you get allies instead of enemies. You get people who want to help you instead of people who are looking for the first chance to stab you in the back. And you get access to human expertise in dealing with difficult situations. General Kexmore laughed bitterly. Human expertise? What could a primitive species possibly teach us? Phillips grinned. Well, for starters, we could teach you how to handle people who refuse to do what you want them to do. Seems like that might be a useful skill for the next few months. The Emperor's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a bright blue that indicated interest and possibility. You think this will work? I think it is worth trying. What do you have to lose? If it does not work, you can always go back to conquering people and blowing up planets. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then General Kexmore spoke, his voice shaking with fury. This is treason. I will not allow you to destroy our empire. He raised his weapon toward the Emperor, but before he could fire, Phillips threw his coffee cup. It hit Kexmore in the face, hot coffee splashing everywhere. The general stumbled backward, and the Emperor's guards immediately surrounded him. Thank you, the Emperor said to Phillips. Phillips shrugged. No problem. I never did like people who point weapons at my friends. 6 months later, Ambassador Ryan Phillips sat in his new office on the Imperial Station. The room was much nicer than his old quarters, with a big window that looked out at the traffic of ships coming and going. His desk still had boot marks on it from that first day, and he had decided to keep them as a reminder. The door chimed, and Emperor Vexthari walked in. He was wearing simpler clothes now, and his scales were usually the calm blue-green that indicated contentment. They had been meeting like this every week, working on the transition from Empire to Confederation. Good morning, Ryan, the Emperor said, sitting down in the sea.